why are they going to arrive, Paul? And the why they're going to arrive answer can't be related to being in network because they can call 300 other clinics in town who are in network. It can't be because they got a time next Thursday at 2. I'm like, now I'll call 5 other clinics and we'll get Thursday at 2 or before. It can't be because we treat low back pain, because there's actually 5,000 clinics within a 1 mile radius that treat low back pain. So I keep challenging, why are they going to arrive?
Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Strata. Strata is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata, talks with Jerry Durham, a PT and the CEO of the Client Experience Company. Jerry helps practices craft incredible patient experiences that help grow your revenue. Jerry and Paul talk through how to reduce no-shows and cancels fast, mastering the front-end sales process, how to make sure your PTs don't burn out and quit, and the importance of retention systems. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
Marketing is about getting your name out there, and certainly like you should be doing that however you do that in your geography. But what we're talking about here is fundamentally sales 101. Use the prospect's name, ask better questions. But that being said, though, what I would say is that ultimately marketing's job is really to make the phone ring for the practice.
Yeah, once that phone rings, I would say marketing, this is where that feedback loop comes in really handy, right? So, right, I agree with you, right? Well, once the phone rings, marketing's done. Yet, let's say this, marketing's done, but it's my job to go, what'd you see? What'd you hear? Why are you calling us? This took me forever to learn. Let me give you the prime example of how sales is its own monster, right? Is forever. Right. When I was answering the phone, right? Oh, do you have a doctor's referral? Yeah, Dr. Smith sent us. Oh, great. Dr. Smith sends us lots of patients. Write a thank you note to Dr. Smith. Dude, this went on for years. One day I was like, wait a minute. Do you have a doctor's referral? Yeah. Who sent you? Dr. Smith. Great, Paul. So did Dr. Smith tell you to come to us directly, or did he give you a list of clinics? Oh, Dr. Smith gave me a list of clinics. And I realized that I've been sending out thank you notes for the past 5 years to some fucker who's been handing out a list of PT clinics as a thank you for referring your patient to us. So again, this breakdown of where cells fit in, no joke, man. And that, by the way, I did that for years and years. So this connectedness of cells then being able to, this feedback loop of so I use this example, and I think you'll appreciate this, Paul. I used this example last week. I said, if you're using the lead tracker and you're in week 2 and you see you're below your required number of leads, you can then go back and look at the source from last month, the last 2 months, what has driven the most people into this business. And you can make a short-term decision, right, to say, we need more leads. Let's pump this, right? Or things are going well, right? And you go, okay, Jerry, hey, another good month. Where are all these leads coming from? Oh, they're all coming from these 2 sources. So let's double down on these resources for the next 6 months. That's why I'm like, if you notice, and I do this very purposefully, is no new marketing. I would say, right, if you have the feedback loop going, then you maybe don't need new marketing. You keep reinvesting in the things you've been doing. But right, and Paul, I've seen your posts on this, right? We fall into one extreme or the other. It's one referral source, or we just are so spread out across everything and we're not measuring the results of them, any of them.
Yeah. So when you talk about measuring results, which by the way, I agree with, and I know this is like one example, but let's just kind of go down this path. So you mentioned the person you were talking to said, oh, this is too much work, or we can't do it. Why do you think they're saying that? Is that because it's uncomfortable? I mean, they're not dumb, right? They're smart people that you got to be smart to like start these things. So what do you think the core reason is that they push back?
they don't see the connectedness, number one, right, of marketing and sales and even retention. And what they'll do, and I'm running through this now, I'm running through this week, right? They can break down any one process, but they can't tell you how it's connected to the process before. So they're smart enough. And by the way, this was me, so I'm not bashing on anyone in particular. I'm bashing on everybody. Probably some of the largest groups in the country, we could do the same thing with, put them in a room and they couldn't show us the connectedness because they have built out, right? And so this is my challenge, and I've said this before here, is what kind of business did you build? And so we get comfortable with where we are, right? And then we're faced with this whole lifelong issue. Actually, we call it a lifelong problem that's been around since the dawn of time. Is the stimulus to change great enough and bigger than the stimulus to remain status quo? So if I got no freaking money in the bank, right, that's a pretty good stimulus for change. But what I see with a lot of these businesses is they have grown comfortable with what they know, and they're comfortable now. When you present them with this, and I've gone through this a couple of times in the last 6 months, when you present them with this new unknown and this pile of cash over here, the fear of the change is greater than just staying with the status quo, right? So what happens if we invest and it doesn't change? I'm like, you still stay at the same shitty level. What happens if we invest and it gets worse? I'm like, it can't get any worse. And I'm like, so the only option here is the upside. But they don't want to invest it. So it's kind of that the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And I see it played out every day. And we're talking, dude, last two people I did this with, it was 7 figures plus a year. And that wasn't some unrealistic, oh my God, if you do this 100% of the time and you get 100% of the success, 365, it'll go to this. I was like, I lowballed this number for you. And if you only change 10, 20%. So it's that it really is. And as much as I hate mindset stuff and I hate people that are always talking mindset, it really is. It's this, if I show you you're losing $300,000 a month, what is it in your head that's having you go, well, let's catch up in a quarter, in 2 quarters, in 3 quarters? I'm like, I'm confused. And I've done that with people recently because it's so baffling. And I think it's the devil you don't know. And you're comfortable in that status quo, man.
Well, I think there's something to that. I mean, I think that if you were to ask any rational person whether it's good or bad to have a sales process, they're almost always going to say it's good to have a sales process. I think where we're kind of heading with this is that usually the pushback is emotional, even if they can't articulate it.
Yeah, you are correct. It's the sunk cost fallacy, right? The sunk cost fallacy is a lot of it.
Yeah, well, it could be sunk cost fallacy. It could be, it could be that there's this subconscious desire to not actually know, because gosh, what happens if it was wrong? What if it actually exposes that I'm wrong?
Yeah. Well, once you tell them, I'm like, have you shared this? I asked some people, have you shared this with your team? Oh no, absolutely not. And I'm like, oh, interesting.
What is that tracking, or what does that tracker look like to you? So when you were talking about that with them, that person that pushed back, is this like a spreadsheet? Is there a CRM? What do you usually like to kind of roll out for something like this? There
are 2 things I still share with people that I created for 6 months of running my own business. And the lead tracker is one of them. And it was an Excel sheet. Now it's Google Sheet. And so I think what people look at it, Paul, they think, oh my God, I think this is part of it, right? And so it's always more complex. But they already see they're filling out the EMR. They already see they're filling out insurance stuff. They already see there's intake paper. And then I bring another sheet. They're like, oh, we don't have time for this. And I'm like, it's not to be repeated. You're not redoing the same thing. It's first name, last name, phone number at the very least. And then and this is the thing people do, right? Oh, referral source. I'm like, no, how did you find us? Has to be the question, right? And then did they schedule or not? If so, put a date. And if not, put when the follow-up is. That's it, Paul. And I'm going to tell you, that thing is worth 6 figures, 7 figures to a large company. Because then I show them, look, this isn't, there's 8 things you can grab off of this that bring more value into your company, right? Who are the top salespeople, right? How are people finding you? What's happening? Why the drop-offs? How many drop-offs? How many no-shows, right? All this stuff come off of that sheet. And that feedback loop to marketing, to better sales, to ongoing sales training, to downstream issues. When I used to get after I started connecting these dots, right? So first 10 years of my business, if someone canceled, if they were on your schedule, Paul, you were the provider, I'd just go yell at you. Paul, you got to get your cancels done. You got to get, and I sat there doing that battle for 10 years with no change. The day I went upstream and we changed our first phone call conversation and I watched our cancel rate literally drop by 50%, I was like, oh, oops. Right. And so if someone drops off in a business I'm working with, first thing we do is go back to the beginning. Who took the call? What's the referral source? How did they find us? I'm looking at, did the steps of the process get followed? Then if so, then I know which direction to go. But if it didn't, we even know if it's a problem that needs solving. Hey, Jerry, can you just follow the process every time, please? Thank you. We're done. So the feedback from the free piece of paper with like 10 data points on it, here we are again, and I'm getting ready to put together another talk. I'm like, there is no ROI bigger than your front end sales process. There is nothing you can put a dollar in that will return a bigger return than setting up a proper front end sales process. There's nothing in your business that over time will return the ROI of this. Nothing.
I think that's right. Just anecdote, and I bet you we could pull data on this from our back end systems to prove it. But I think anecdotally, I think you're right. I mean, there's just, minute for minute, the highest ROI is going to be right there at that front desk.
Yeah, exactly. Day in and day out. And it's the job they're currently doing, and it's the data they're collecting back to your world, right? Where are we going to spend our dollar in our marketing this month, next quarter? This is a direct result of that. And the answers are in there. And it leads people. I believe with the calls, I used to train people on the first phone call. I used to train them in a manner of following the lead trajectory, right? And that's how the conversation was managed, so that we move people from their name to a contact, to how did you find us, to their problem they needed solved, and what expert were they scheduled, and did they schedule? And if no, why not, right?
It's interesting because, as you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, I was talking to someone about a month ago now, and it leads me to this one thought, and I'm just going to say this to kind of maybe give you a little bit more supporting evidence that I think front desk is where minute for minute, that's where you're going to get the highest ROI. Anyway, I'll just get to the conclusion. My mental conclusion, or my mental model here is that most practices by default are profitable. What happens though is that all that profit gets chipped away with 1,000 cuts. Oh, it's just one no-show. Oh, it's just one, missed appointment. Oh, it's just one copay that, we'll get it on the next one, and then next thing you know, like on paper, when you model it out, it should be 20, 25, maybe even 30% net margins at the bottom. And you start to look at what actually has occurred over the last 90 days. And you're like, oh, that's why you're barely single digits. Maybe you're upside down. And we're recording this, mid-February of 2024. This really gets exposed in the month of January when all the copays reset.
Dude, I love that. I'm the only guy posting every January, happy January, because I'm making more money than you because of our sales process.
Let me ask you this. When you call these guys, like when you do these secret shopping, let me just set this up. I know there's a million reasons, that we probably shouldn't secret shop somebody on the air. I get that, right? But walk me through, like, let's just say a practice owner is listening to this right now, and let's just say they're too scared to call you because, oh gosh, I don't want, Daddy Jerry to yell at me here. So, let's just say they like cold call their own practice. What should they be testing for? What are they looking for?
I will send them, anybody who hears this, who wants the 5-step process I train on, and I can drop it here, Thomas. You guys can share it with anybody. And so here's my world, and here's how I got here. Reverse engineering success has been good for me, right? It's not the only way to do the work, but it's been very, very good for me. It's got me to where I am, and I believe because of that, I can help other people. Boom. So I reverse engineer success from this question, Paul. Why will they arrive? Because before you could record calls easily, before people were thinking about it, I would sit next to my front desk people And I thought it would be stupid. I thought there's nothing I can do with one side of a conversation. But when I heard only my team's side of it, right, I actually would hear things like they would start to have a story with them. And I'd go, okay, so what went before that? Right. Or I would hear a response and I would say, oh, what prompted that? So we had a great conversation. And what I found was really at the end of it, well, all I wanted to do was if I was sitting next to Paul and he took a call without me hearing it, I'd go, cool. Why are they going to arrive, Paul? And the why they're going to arrive answer can't be related to being in network because they can call 300 other clinics in town who are in network. It can't be because they got a time next Thursday at 2. I'm like, no, I'll call 5 other clinics and we'll get Thursday at 2 or before. It can't be because we treat low back pain because there's actually 5,000 clinics within a 1 mile radius that treat low back pain. So I keep challenging, why are they going to arrive, right? Oh, their doctor gave them a referral, but their doctor gave them a list. Why will they arrive? So here's the kicker, and it's in the research. And I put this everywhere. It's as simple as this. So if everybody just left this call and built this out, people arrive because they know they have an expert that will tell them why they can't do the things they desire, why they can't go to the gym pain-free, and why they can't get up out of bed in the morning without pain. And then they want to know they're going to get a plan of care. They want to know they're going to get an outline of their journey back to those 2 things. First day I ever read that in the research, I was like, that's PT. And by the way, I pulled a bunch of medical research, not just PT research, and saw it was those 3 things. And so I was like, we just got to let people know. Most of what I did was available for providers working with patients. And it was written that way. And I kept going, what happens if we just move it upstream? Because again, reverse engineering success. Right. I go, well, most of the things I've done have been because I've moved things upstream. So I said, I'm going to move this upstream. So I took that feedback of what people wanted from a healthcare provider and I baked it into the sales process. And here's a guarantee I'll make to anybody on here. 100% of the time, call your own clinic, call anybody else's clinic. You won't get those 3 things told to you. And yet the research says this is what every consumer of healthcare wants from their healthcare provider. So I baked it in the conversations. You hang up the phone, and mind you, then we build in the other thing, right? There's social proof, there's individual proof, there's, you're pitched on what you get for your time, money, and energy with your expert. Don't get me wrong, right? And by the way, you'll see it in the 5 steps. But if you follow those 5 steps, your conversion rate will go up. That money sitting on the books that you flush down the toilet every month will now go into the bank account. It'll go the other direction. This is my whole no new marketing till you get this sales process down. And then you'll also see with no new marketing, you'll see improvements in your metrics, arrival rate, completed plans of care, revenue, right? Let's just talk about revenue.
Yeah.
If you have more slots filled and people show up, it's not magic, right? So that's what has to be done. Those 3 things have to be sold on every single phone call.
Yeah. And we were doing an episode with Ben Gallen, Ben Gallen on our show here a week or 2 ago. And I was thinking of you because we were talking about, the content. It was in the context of key metrics for businesses and valuations and stuff like that. He said something that made me think of you, particularly in the context of what we're talking about here. He said he thinks that the cancel rate or the no-show rate is probably the best proxy for the value of a practice. In other words, like that one metric, that one, when you look at cancel rate or no-show rate or whatever you want to call it, that conceptual metric is the composite metric that tells you the health of the front desk, gives you a pretty good idea of what the net margins are going to be.
Yeah. And I've been saying that for years, Paul, and not to steal his thunder and saying he can't say that. It's where I even went, but remember, it took me like 15 years to go, wait a minute. So I literally say that your drop-off rate, and this is the problem. You said cancel, no-show, drop-off. You're right. You got to throw it in the bucket because every owner manipulates that number to make their business look better. But it plays out. It plays out when you start to ask better questions. They can't hide it. And so they changed, cancel the reschedule. I'm like, a person moving from this slot to another slot is a cancel call. Because this is where I get to, you have to document this because we're going to change cancel calls. I'm going to decrease the number of people calling to cancel. So a slot changed is still a cancel. You don't get to rechange the definition to reschedule. So I agree 100%, Paul. And what I call that, when I tell people, when I start talking about scaling and valuing your company, I said, if you can show your work, your company is more valuable. Well, when I talk about show your work, it's the process and systems to decrease cancels, no shows, and drop offs.
Right.
I agree 130% with that. That is the biggest tell. I've gone to some of these groups buying and said, why don't you let me help you evaluate the retention systems or the anti-retention system? And I said, I can give you a factor and a number, and you guys will then have awareness, because you don't have to use me, but I'm like, use me to get this number. And then you guys immediately know, what is this like short term, 6 months, 9 months margin we can, right? You just said, if you're leaving 20% on the table and I show you where it is and you can get that back in 6 months, isn't this more valuable? But nobody wants to have that conversation, man. I'm baffled.
Not to make it about us, but, I think one of the biggest
Sure.
roadblocks to people moving forward to fix their practice, to fix these underlying things, whether it's the no-show rate or the reimbursement rate or whatever. I think there's like this mental block because over the years, there's just been so many bad actors that have ruined it for everybody. Like I stand by the statement that most practices, if not all practices, are actually profitable on paper. If you look at the pro rata and you kind of build it out, it works.
It's there.
But and then those margins just get cut away, whittled away with all these little inefficiencies. And then nobody wants to fix it. And I'll go one step further and say that, you talked about like, oh, well, it could take 6 months to see the ROI. I don't think that's true. I actually think despite the timing of cash flows sort of problem that we have in this industry, from the time that, the patient sees you to the time their insurance might pay out, let's just call it an average of 40 days plus or minus, depending on the payer. I think you see ROI within 2 months.
I agree with you. I just like build in a little cushion, right? Because I'm like, look, if you want to guarantee, I'll guarantee this, and you're going to have to pay me a boatload of cash. If you just want to come along and I'll show you how to do it, give me 6 months, and I just build in the cushion, right? And you're right. And Paul, this comes back to your post. You just made me think your post today, which is so true, and I never hear anybody challenge this. So it's February 19th, 2024. Why do people wait to post their bills? I just looked at that. I went, it's never made sense to me. And I don't argue with people about it, but it's never made sense to me. So again, so now, by the way, Paul, you wait 2 weeks and then it takes 40 days. You just added 14 days.
Bingo. That's right.
Or even better, Paul, they kick it back after 39 days, right?
Well, that's exactly what happens. Yeah. I mean, we actually publish this stat. So if you go to our public benchmarks, if you go to the practice benchmarks link on our site and you drill down state by state, we actually publish the average number of days between the visit and, when documentation's complete. And obviously, ideally, it should be same day. But in some cases, it's not uncommon to see it slip maybe 1 or 2 days. I remember talking to one practice owner a couple of months ago. I don't mean to laugh, but she was like, yeah, I batch it all. I do it all on like Fridays at lunch or something like that. And, I tried to convince her otherwise. She wasn't one of our clients. I was just like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I think, maybe we should talk about, you should do it, I don't know, every lunch, Anyway, I just set a calendar reminder for 90 days to call her back, see how she was doing. And sure enough, she had gotten a job. Practice ownership wasn't for her. But it's back to that. It's that people don't understand, that timing of cash flows. Like this was actually when I alluded to that conversation with Ben Gallen on our show here a couple of weeks ago, it was in the context of like, hey, why don't more practice owners understand the difference between a balance sheet and a P&L? And more importantly, like when you start to read those two documents, like starting to understand the timing of cash flows and how things hit and how it's all reported, it's almost like there ought to be a finance 101 conversation, because this isn't rocket science. This isn't like the kind of thing where you need a CFO to figure it out.
I actually created Remember I said there were two documents? This is what's scary. The second document I created, because I still look at it and don't know where it came from. I created I'm just going to say it out loud. I created a more proactive pro forma that I give my clients so they can manage their business day to day, week to week, Paul. And I created it off an Excel sheet. And I tell them it is a vision into today. Yet the way I've set it up, you can also plug in new employees and more visits and more capacity to then look at what does your future look like. You can increase your revenue per visit by $5 and see what the impact would be on. I created this on my own and it's evolved over time. And it is a Google sheet that started from a form I created the day before I opened my own business, which was two columns: expenses, revenue divided by number of visits. That was it. That's how it started. And I saw someone's pro forma and I said, I'm not going to argue with the history of this thing, but I'm going to go, this document right here can help you better day to day. And so again, I got into it and I wanted to understand. Yeah, I didn't want to understand week to week, month to month. I was like, no, I want to know where I am today. And you can go in and plug in today and know where you are today, right? So I like this idea of today. And this to me is a lead tracker, right? Because I'm hearing this person, right? Well, I don't have the time to get my front desk to enter bills every day. And you just be like, wait a minute, I don't get it. Explain this to me like I'm 5, because it's not making sense. So tracking the leads, getting your bills in, right? Knowing where you are today. Dude, I used to go to bed every night and know if we were on track or not for the month because of this lead tracker I had. I knew if we were ahead, behind, right on schedule every night. Call me crazy, but I wanted to, I wanted something that would run itself.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I know this isn't the exact topic of today, but I think one of the open secrets that people don't realize, and I don't know, people are either going to tune out now or get annoyed right now when I say this, but like, most people don't realize that the airline companies like the Uniteds and the Deltas and the American Airlines, most people don't realize that the airlines make more money off of things like credit cards and fuel futures and stuff like that, rather than the operations of the airplanes themselves.
Yeah.
Very similar to Starbucks. Starbucks effectively makes more money off of the Starbucks card, the value stored on the Starbucks card, than the actual sale of cups of coffee. Some finance nerd listening to me like, well, but Paul, but thing is, if you go read the public earnings reports, these are open secrets. These are people, everybody knows this. But I think it comes back, now bring it all the way back to practices. It's like show me any practice and we model it out on paper, 99.9% chance it is actually profitable on paper. But then you lose all that profit because you complete your documentation once every 5 days, or your cancel rate goes up to X% because, in your mind, you're thinking, oh, it's just that one patient. It's not a big deal. Not that one. It's just that one. But now I'm going to tie this all the way back to where you started your conversation, which is like, unless you actually can put this on a spreadsheet and start to track it, you're never going to know what that, you're dying a death of 1,000 cuts as a practice owner. But until you actually kind of get over that mental hurdle and start putting it onto a spreadsheet and you accept the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable to look at it, you're going to be in trouble. But anyway, that's like the mental hurdle. I think I wish there was a way, you and I have talked about the idea of like a business accelerator or something like that. But like, man, I wish there was a way to just hold people accountable to this, because I really do think practices by default are profitable. It's the operator or the owner that screws it up.
The sheet I make most of my new clients fill out it tells you on paper, Paul, where you have to change it. It has been a rare day, back to prove your point, of all the years of using this, there has been a day or two where people plugged it in and I'm like, you realize what this is showing you? I'm like, you're losing money every month. Oh, well, no, not really. Every once in a while I skip a paycheck, but it's no big deal. When you look at they're losing, right, like $500-$600 a month, I'm like, oh yeah. So you skip about every fifth, right? Every fifth month you skip a paycheck. It makes up for 500. I'm like, it maths out. I'm like, no big deal, huh? And so,
that's terrifying.
This is back to the beginning with the lead tracker, right? What are you measuring? right? What are you measuring? And do you understand the connectedness of marketing, sales, retention? And then where do you put these numbers? This is one interesting world, Paul, because people will continue to stuff the top of the funnel and justify everything they do because their phone is ringing every day. And then the PTs are burned out because they have 10, 12, 15 new patients on their schedule because they can't or they haven't been trained. I would put that on the PT because they're not doing work for retention. I used to have PTs all the time. Why do I have so many new patients? I'm like, you have control of your slots. It's up to you. Schedule your people out, complete plans of care, right? All of it. I'm like, you have full control over this. And the reason you have new patients on your schedule is because you can't keep people on your schedule, of which those people didn't last long in the last half of my company. They quit. They would self-select out. And so this measuring the right thing and then understanding the impact, I'm like, you want to stop burnout? Have PTs just see the people that were on their schedule all week, and they know everybody and they're moving them through. But a new patient, this one dropped off. You drop someone else is now on your schedule. I'm like, I call it the chaos. It creates the chaos that kills. Oh, my front desk team's just turning over all the time. I'm like, you know who that's on. As soon as someone tells me that, I'm like, you. And by the way, it was me. It was me for a long time. I got to keep throwing that disclaimer in there because I'm not taking some high road here, man. It took me a lot of money and a lot of time, more than a lot of people know, to finally figure that all out. And so I'm just trying to share with people that this isn't rocket science. There's an Excel spreadsheet. Here's another Excel spreadsheet, right? Here's marketing, here's sales, here's retention. Now you got to implement. You got to take the action.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.